My name is Anika. I am 27 years old, and if you looked at me today, you might think I have everything a woman could dream of. A husband, a house, and a life that looks stable from the outside. But deep inside, I carry a silence heavier than words can hold. When I was younger, I used to dream of a love that would protect me, make me smile, and remind me of my worth. I imagined late-night conversations, warm laughter over simple dinners, and someone who would hold my hand through life's storms. But life doesn't always give us what we dream of. Sometimes it gives us lessons instead of love. And now, sitting by the window of my bedroom, staring at the rain dripping down the glass, all I can whisper to myself is, I regret my marriage. When I first met Armin, I believed fate had finally answered my prayers. He was charming, confident, and had a way of making me feel like I was the only woman in the room. I still remember the first time he smiled at me. It was during my friend's wedding. He looked straight into my eyes and held my gaze long enough for my heart to skip. We talked for hours that night, about music, dreams, and the future. I thought I had found my forever. He told me he admired women who were different, women who carried quiet strength. And I wanted so badly to be that woman for him. The first months of our relationship were magical. He would bring me flowers, send me long texts at midnight, and call me just to say he missed me. My heart bloomed in ways it never had before. My friends teased me, saying, Anika, you finally found your prince. And I believed them. Our wedding was a grand affair. The hall was filled with lights, music, and the scent of roses. I wore a red dress that my mother had chosen for me, and when I walked down the aisle, I caught a glimpse of her teary smile. She believed I was stepping into happiness. Armin held my hand tightly as the vows were spoken. His voice was strong, steady, full of promises that sounded eternal. I told myself, this is the beginning of my happily ever after. But I didn't know that happiness can sometimes be a mask. Fragile, temporary, and easily broken. The first few months of marriage felt like a continuation of our love story. But slowly I noticed changes. Armin stopped calling me during the day. He came home late, saying he was busy with work. Our dinners became silent, and the flowers he once brought me were replaced with cold excuses. At first I thought it was normal, that every marriage goes through phases. I tried harder. I cooked his favorite meals, dressed beautifully, and waited for him at the door. But his eyes no longer lit up when he saw me. His words grew sharp, and sometimes his silence was worse than anger. One night when I asked him why he was distant, he simply said, "Stop imagining things, Anika. Not everything is about you." That sentence cut deeper than any knife. The house we lived in was beautiful, at least from the outside. People who visited admired the wide windows, the carefully arranged furniture, and the photographs of us smiling at our wedding. But they didn't see the silence that lived in those walls. At night, I would lie awake beside Armin, listening to the sound of his steady breathing while my own chest felt heavy with unshed tears. I wanted to reach out, to hold his hand, to whisper, "Do you still love me?" But my pride held me back, and his indifference created a wall I could not climb. Some mornings I would prepare breakfast, tea just the way he liked it, eggs with a touch of salt. He would eat in silence, scrolling on his phone, his eyes never lifting to meet mine. When he left for work, he no longer kissed my forehead like he once did. Instead, he simply grabbed his keys and walked out, leaving the door swinging shut behind him. I began to wonder if love had an expiration date. Did it fade quietly, without warning, leaving only memories behind? The girl I once was, the one who dreamed of love and laughter, felt like a stranger now. I was just a shadow moving through the house, waiting for a smile that never came, for a word of kindness that remained unsaid. Sometimes I stood in front of the mirror, staring at my own reflection. "Where did I go wrong?" I whispered. But the mirror never answered. It's strange how two people can share the same roof, the same bed, and yet feel like strangers. The distance between Armin and me was no longer measured in miles, but in silence. Every evening I waited for the sound of his car, hoping he would come home early, hoping maybe today he would look at me the way he once did. But most nights he arrived late, smelling faintly of perfume that was not mine, carrying excuses that sounded rehearsed. At first I convinced myself I was imagining things. He's just busy. He's stressed. He still loves me. But deep inside, a small, trembling voice whispered the truth I was too afraid to face. I was losing him. One night, I gathered the courage to ask, "Armin, do you still love me?" He looked at me as if I had asked the most ridiculous question in the world. "Why do you women always need drama? Can't we just live peacefully without these useless talks?" I felt my heart sink, but I forced a smile, hiding my tears. Peaceful. Is this what peace meant? Silence, distance, and a love that had turned cold. That night, after he fell asleep, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Memories came flooding back. The way he once held my hand tightly. The way he once whispered my name like it was a prayer. I wanted to shake him, to remind him of those days. But instead I turned away from him, pressing my face into the pillow, and cried quietly so he wouldn't hear. The distance wasn't just in our words anymore. It was in our hearts. And I feared it was growing wider every single day. It was a Friday evening when my heart finally shattered. I had cooked his favorite meal, chicken curry with soft, warm bread, hoping maybe it would bring back the spark we had lost. I set the table with care, lit a small candle, and waited for him, my heart clinging to a fragile hope. But Armin didn't come home. Hours passed. The food grew cold, the candle melted into a puddle of wax, and I sat alone at the table, staring at the empty chair across from me. Finally, close to midnight, I heard the sound of his car. My heart leapt, but the moment he stepped inside, I smelled the faint scent of alcohol mixed with perfume, one that didn't belong to me. His shirt collar was slightly crumpled, and his eyes avoided mine. "Where were you?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Don't start, Anika," he muttered, tossing his keys on the table. "I was with friends. Don't act like a detective." I swallowed the lump in my throat, but tears blurred my vision. "I waited for you. I made dinner. You could have at least called." He turned to me, his eyes sharp. "Do you have to make everything about you? Stop acting like a child. I'm tired." Those words, cold, dismissive, cruel, broke something inside me. I had carried patience, love, and silence for so long, but in that moment, the truth crashed into me like a storm. I was no longer his priority. I was no longer his choice. And maybe I was no longer his love. That night, when he turned away and fell asleep without another word, I sat at the edge of the bed, staring at his back. My chest ached as if someone had carved out my heart and left an empty space behind. I whispered into the darkness, words he would never hear. "I regret my marriage." And for the first time, I realized regret was heavier than loneliness. It was a wound that never healed, a shadow that followed me everywhere. Sometimes, when the house grew too quiet and my heart felt too heavy, I found myself walking to the old wooden chest where I kept pieces of my past. Inside were faded photographs, a diary filled with dreams, and little notes I had written to myself back in college. There was one photo I always paused on, a picture of me at 21, standing in front of a library with a wide smile, my hair messy from the wind. My eyes in that photo were full of hope, full of life. That girl had dreams of becoming a writer, of traveling the world, of finding someone who would love her unconditionally. Where had she gone? Marriage had taken pieces of me, little by little. I no longer wrote in my diary. I no longer sang in the kitchen while cooking. I no longer laughed at silly things the way I used to. It was as if the woman I used to be had vanished, replaced by someone who walked carefully, spoke softly, and carried sadness in her silence. One evening, while Armin was out, I sat with that photo pressed against my chest and whispered, "Do you remember her, Anika? Do you remember who you used to be before you lost yourself in this marriage?" The truth stung. I realized I missed myself more than I missed him. Tears slipped down my face as I wrote in my old diary for the first time in years. "I don't recognize myself anymore. I gave everything, my love, my loyalty, my dreams. And all I received in return was silence. I don't know if I'm strong enough to leave, but I know I can't keep living like this. I regret my marriage, but more than that, I regret losing myself in it. Closing the diary, I hugged it close, as if it held the only pieces of me I still had left. For the first time in months I realized if I wanted to survive, I needed to remember who I used to be. Days turned into weeks, and the silence between Armin and me grew heavier than ever. Our house felt less like a home and more like a cage where two strangers lived side by side, pretending to be husband and wife. I tried to keep myself busy, watering the plants, cleaning the rooms, folding laundry, but no matter what I did, the emptiness followed me. The sound of the clock ticking on the wall was sometimes the only reminder that time was still moving, even though my life felt stuck. When Armin was home, he was distant. When he wasn't, the house felt like a hollow shell. Loneliness became my companion. I would sit by the window, watching couples walk by hand in hand, their laughter drifting through the air. I envied them, not for their beauty, not for their wealth, but for the simple joy of being truly seen by someone. I longed for someone to ask me, "How was your day?" or to notice when I was quiet. But Armin's words had become limited to short commands or complaints. "Where's my shirt? Why is dinner late? Don't waste money on unnecessary things." I felt invisible, like my presence no longer mattered. Sometimes I called my mother just to hear a voice that cared. But even then, I couldn't tell her the truth. I couldn't let her know how much I was suffering, because she believed I was living the life she had dreamed for me. A secure marriage, a stable home. So I lied. I told her I was fine. I told her Armin was busy but kind. And after hanging up, I cried into my pillow, my heart aching with the weight of the truth I was too afraid to share. The loneliness wasn't just in the empty rooms. It was in me. It was in my laughter that never came, in my tears that no one wiped away, in the silence that swallowed my voice every time I tried to speak. Every day I asked myself the same question. Is this all marriage is supposed to be? And every day the answer was silence. There are truths that live inside your heart, truths that scream to be spoken, but you swallow them again and again until they begin to poison you. For me, that truth was simple. I was no longer in love with my husband. I carried this confession like a secret wound. Every time I looked at Armin, I felt the emptiness between us, the love that had withered away. Sometimes I wanted to tell him that I was breaking, that I was drowning in silence, that I wanted more than this hollow marriage. But every time the words reached my lips, fear pulled them back. What if he didn't care? What if he laughed at me? What if leaving meant disappointing everyone who believed in our marriage? So I kept quiet, played my role. I smiled in front of relatives, pretending everything was fine. I walked beside Armin at family gatherings, our hands brushing but never holding, our eyes never meeting. And everyone thought we were perfect. But at night, when the world was asleep, I would lie awake, whispering the confession I could never speak out loud. I regret this marriage. I regret choosing him. I regret believing that love was enough. Sometimes I imagined what life would have been like if I had been braver, if I had chosen differently, if I had followed my dreams instead of chasing a love that betrayed me. But regret is a cruel companion. It shows you all the doors you could have opened, all the lives you could have lived, but locks you inside the one you chose. And so, my confession remained mine alone, buried deep in the silence of my heart. Armin never knew because he never asked. And I never told him, because by then, I had learned that some confessions are safer left unspoken. It was a rainy night, the kind of night I used to love. When I was younger, rain meant comfort. I would sit by the window with a cup of tea, listening to the rhythm of the drops against the glass, feeling peace in the storm outside. But now, rain only reminded me of storms inside me, the ones no one could see. That evening, Armin came home later than usual. He didn't look at me. He didn't ask if I had eaten. He simply walked past me, dropped his shoes in the corner, and shut himself in the study. The sound of the door closing echoed in my chest like a final goodbye. I sat alone at the dining table, staring at the untouched food I had prepared. My hands trembled as I lifted the spoon, but I couldn't eat. My stomach was heavy with loneliness. The rain outside grew stronger, and something inside me finally cracked. I pushed the plate away, ran to the bedroom, and collapsed on the floor. My body shook with sobs I had held back for too long. I cried for the girl I used to be. I cried for the love I thought I had. I cried for the dreams that had turned into dust. Why, God? Why me? I whispered into the emptiness. My voice was hoarse, my heart aching. For the first time, I didn't care if Armin heard me. I didn't care if the world judged me. My pain poured out in waves, raw and unstoppable. I wanted to scream. I regret marrying you. I regret giving you my heart. I regret believing your promises. But the words remained locked inside, caught between anger and fear. That night, I fell asleep on the floor with my tears as my pillow. The rain outside eventually stopped, but the storm within me had only just begun. When I woke the next morning, my eyes were swollen, my body weak. Armin didn't notice. He walked past me, sipping his coffee, scrolling on his phone, as if nothing had happened. And in that moment, I realized something that hurt more than anything else. It wasn't just that he didn't love me anymore. It was that he didn't even see me anymore. Love is supposed to be alive, breathing, moving, glowing like fire. But what we had now wasn't love. It was routine, habit. Armin and I lived like two actors playing a script we no longer believed in. We shared meals without conversation, shared a bed without warmth, and shared a life without joy. He didn't hurt me with his hands, but he hurt me with something far worse. His indifference. I used to believe the opposite of love was hate. But I was wrong. The opposite of love is indifference. And that was all he gave me. There were mornings when he would hand me his coffee cup without looking up, expecting me to refill it. I would take it silently, my heart aching, wondering how I had become nothing more than a shadow in his life. At night, when he turned off the light and faced away from me, I would stare into the darkness, remembering the days when he used to pull me close, whispering promises of forever. Now, the only sound was his steady breathing while I lay awake, drowning in loneliness. Sometimes I caught myself thinking, maybe this is my fate. Maybe women are meant to sacrifice their happiness for the sake of keeping a marriage alive. That's what society whispered, that's what relatives believed. That a woman's worth was measured by her patience, her silence, her ability to endure. But deep down, I knew this wasn't life. It was survival. And survival without love is nothing but a slow death. One evening, as I was folding laundry, I found one of his shirts with a faint trace of perfume. Sweet, unfamiliar, not mine. My hands froze on the fabric. My heart pounded, but strangely I didn't even cry. Instead I felt numb. Maybe because part of me already knew. Love had long left our home. All that remained was habit. Cold, empty, suffocating. And I began to wonder. How much longer can a person live on habit before their soul breaks completely? Questions began to fill my mind, chasing me day and night like shadows I couldn't escape. Why did he change? Was it me? Was I not enough? Does he love someone else now? If I leave, will I survive? If I stay, will I ever be happy? They were questions with no answers, and yet they consumed me. Every morning when I looked at my reflection, I asked myself, is this what you wanted, Anika? Is this the life you dreamed of when you were younger? My reflection never replied, but the silence was loud enough. I watched Armin carefully, searching for clues in the way he moved, in the way he avoided my eyes, in the way his smile never reached me anymore. I wanted to ask him directly, do you love me? Do you even want me here? But fear kept me silent. I was afraid of the answer, because deep down I already knew. The nights were the hardest. Lying beside him, so close and yet so far, I felt my heart breaking piece by piece. I wanted to reach out, to shake him, to beg him to look at me the way he used to. But my pride chained me, and his coldness froze me. Some nights I found myself praying. Not for his love anymore, but for strength. Strength to face the truth. Strength to decide whether to stay in a marriage that had turned into a prison, or to walk away into the unknown. But leaving was never simple. Society doesn't forgive women who leave. Families don't understand women who break. And so I stayed, carrying questions that burned inside me like fire, questions that had no answers. And in my silence, regret grew louder. It was a family gathering that broke me. Armin's cousin had invited us for dinner. Their house was filled with laughter, the smell of biryani, and the chatter of children running from room to room. Everyone looked happy, glowing in the warmth of togetherness. I tried to smile, tried to act like the perfect wife standing beside her husband. I poured tea for the elders, laughed politely at jokes, and held my silence while Armin spoke confidently about his work, as if he was the perfect man and we lived the perfect life. But then one of his aunts asked me, "So, Anika, how's married life? You must be so happy with a husband like Armin." The words struck me like a knife. My throat tightened, my chest burned, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. Everyone's eyes turned to me, waiting for my answer. I forced a smile. "Yes, I'm happy," I said softly, my voice trembling. But in that instant I felt something crack inside me. The lie tasted bitter on my tongue. I wanted to scream the truth, that I was not happy, that I was lonely, that my marriage was a cage. But the weight of their expectations, their judgment silenced me. After dinner, while everyone was laughing in the living room, I slipped into the washroom and locked the door. The moment I was alone, the tears I had been holding back spilled over. My body shook as I clutched the sink for balance. "I can't do this anymore," I whispered to my reflection, my voice breaking. The woman staring back at me in the mirror had swollen eyes, trembling lips, and a soul that looked tired of pretending. For the first time I admitted it out loud. Not to Armin, not to anyone else, but to myself. I am not happy. I regret my marriage. That night, I smiled through the rest of the gathering. But inside I knew something had changed. The mask I had worn for so long had cracked, and I couldn't hold it together much longer. The night after the family gathering, I sat alone in our bedroom, staring at the packed silence between Armin and me. He was scrolling on his phone, his face lit by the blue glow of the screen, completely unaware of the storm inside me. For years I had waited, had hoped. I had begged silently for his love to return. But hope had turned into emptiness, and emptiness had turned into regret. That night I finally whispered the words out loud. Not to him but to myself. "I can't do this anymore." I realized something important. Sometimes love doesn't die suddenly. It fades slowly, day by day, until one morning you wake up and realize you are strangers living under the same roof. I wasn't his wife anymore. Not in the way love makes a wife. I was just a shadow filling space in his life, while my own life slipped further and further away from me. And so, with trembling hands, I made a decision. I didn't pack my bags that night. I didn't confront him with accusations. Instead, I chose something even harder. I chose myself. Leaving wasn't about punishing him. It wasn't even about hating him. It was about saving the girl I used to be. The girl who once dreamed of happiness, who once believed she deserved love. When dawn came, I looked at him one last time as he slept peacefully, unaware of the battles I had fought alone. Then I whispered, so softly that only I could hear, "I regret my marriage, but I will not regret choosing myself." And with that, I walked away from the life that had broken me. It wasn't easy. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with fear and judgment. But for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Felt free.